So, if you want to build a highly efficient, perfectly running machine, the very first thing you do is standardize the parts, right?
Right. Yeah, predictability is the ultimate goal there.
Exactly. You want every single cog, every single gear machined to the exact same millimeter. You remove the variables, and by doing that, you just remove the friction.
It's a purely mechanical mindset.
Oh, it is. But then you look at human history and you see people trying to take that exact same engineering blueprint and, well, apply it to building a perfect society.
A utopia.
Right, a utopia. And the blueprint inevitably catches fire because human beings are not, we just aren't uniform cogs.
No, not at all.
We are messy, our desires shift constantly, and honestly, we generate an immense amount of social friction just by existing in the same room as one another.
Which really explains why the history of intentional utopian communities is, it's essentially a graveyard of very fascinating, very complicated failures.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, we are obsessed with the idea of perfect harmony. But achieving it without descending into rigid authoritarian control, that has proven to be a nearly impossible puzzle.
And that puzzle is exactly what we are taking you into today on the deep dive.
Yeah, we've got a really interesting one today.
We're going to examine the anatomy of a modern utopian claim. We're looking at a text that outlines how one specific community tries to engineer this perfect harmony.
But not with administrative laws.
Exactly, not with physical force either. They do it by attempting to rewrite the underlying cultural software of human behavior itself.
So our roadmap for today is an essay written in October 2023 by an author named Zhu Feng.
Right.
It's titled, The Cultural Aspects of the Beauty of Lifechanyuan's Community Life.
Now, to give you some quick context before we pull this all apart, Xue Feng makes some massive sweeping claims in this text.
He really does.
He blends highly specific religious frameworks, controversial political concepts like communism, and just these incredibly bold sociological assertions.
So we need to set some ground rules for today's deep dive, just to be totally clear.
Yes, very important. Because this touches on religion and politics, we are treating this essay like an architect's blueprint.
Right. We aren't here to buy the house.
Exactly. We aren't validating the theology, and we are absolutely not taking sides on any of the political viewpoints.
We are acting strictly as impartial guides for you.
We're simply putting on our hard hats, so to speak, to examine how the author claims the plumbing of this society actually works.
It's a structural analysis. We really want to understand the internal logic of the text on its own terms.
And to do that, we have to start with a very deliberate boundary the author draws right in the introduction.
Yeah, Yu Feng notes that the overall beauty of their community life involves material, emotional, mental, and spiritual factors.
But he explicitly restricts this specific essay solely to the cultural factors.
Right, he leaves the rest for another time. So we want to understand the mechanics of this community. We have to grasp his incredibly specific definition of culture.
Let's focus on that definition, because you know, when you or I hear the word culture, we usually think of surface-level societal outputs, right?
Yeah, we think of art movements or maybe local cuisine.
Or the way a city designs its public transit, traditional music, things like that. But Xue Feng isn't talking about museums and food, is he?
Not at all. He treats culture almost like a biological imperative.
Like it's literally feeding people.
Yeah, he treats it as the literal nourishment of the human soul. The foundational premise of this entire essay is that culture and the soul exist in a direct, closed feedback loop.
Okay, a feedback loop.
It is an active molding force. The text argues that the environment you are exposed to doesn't just influence your tastes, it fundamentally engineers your spiritual and moral composition.
I want to make sure I understand the mechanics of this loop.
Yeah.
He's basically saying that a barbaric, ugly culture inevitably produces barbaric, ugly souls.
Exactly, and those damaged souls then go out and perpetuate more barbaric culture. The loop just feeds itself.
It's a vicious cycle.
Right, but conversely, if you immerse people in what he calls an elegant, profound, and civilized culture, it naturally cultivates refined and noble souls.
And Xue Feng actually uses a very familiar historical text to ground this sociological theory, doesn't he?
He does. He points directly to the Bible, specifically the book of Luke, chapter 6, verses 43 and 44.
Right. He uses the words of Christ Jesus to establish a kind of diagnostic test for society.
The exact quote in the text is, "A good tree cannot produce bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot produce good fruit."
And then it says, You can identify them by their fruit, that is, by the way they act.
Right.
So to help you visualize this at home, think about the soil in a garden.
Okay, I like that analogy.
You could have the most expensive, genetically perfect seeds in the entire world. And those seeds represent individual human beings.
Yeah.
But if you plant those seeds in a plot of soil that is completely saturated with, heavy metals and toxic runoff.
The seeds don't stand a chance.
Exactly. The fruit they bear is going to be warped and poisonous, and you don't blame the seed, right? You blame the soil.
Right, the environment.
And Shuafeng is essentially arguing that modern society's soil is toxic.
That soil analogy perfectly captures his diagnostic method, because the text explicitly states that we don't have to guess about the state of someone's soul.
We can just look at the fruit.
Exactly. By observing the daily behavior, the speech, the interpersonal dynamics, and just the living conditions of any group of people, we can definitively determine whether their underlying culture, their soil, is barbaric or civilized.
Which naturally begs the question for you listening. If Shuafeng is diagnosing the rest of the world's soil as toxic, how does his own garden hold up to this test?
Right. What does it actually look like?
Yeah, well, what is the actual community he claims to have built?
Well, the text introduces us to the second home community, and it's inhabited by residents referred to as Chanyuan Celestials.
Okay, Chanyuan Celestial.
And the author lays out a demographic picture that is clearly designed to preemptively dismantle the idea that this is just some homogenous cult of like-minded people.
The diversity, he claims, is, frankly, it's staggering. He's not just putting 50 identically minded monks in a monastery somewhere.
No, not at all. The text lists Christians living alongside Buddhists, Taoists, Muslims, and Communist Party members.
Wow, and it spans every socioeconomic boundary as well?
It does. You have urban professionals sharing the community with rural agricultural workers.
You have wealthy entrepreneurs cohabitating with people who previously lived in, deep poverty.
Yeah, there are PhD candidates living alongside people who never even finish elementary school.
Even the age range is huge. It spans from people in their 80s all the way down to 5- and 6-year-old children.
It is a massive cross-section of global humanity.
And this brings us to the claims that made me literally stop reading and start questioning the mechanics of this whole thing.
The behavioral claim.
Yes. Zuifeng states that these hundreds of diverse residents have endured over a decade of trials and tribulations together. Yet he claims they have lived for over 10 years completely free of quarrels, conflicts, complaints, or condemnation.
It's wild. And he goes further. He says there is zero theft, zero corruption, zero poverty, and zero laziness.
Okay, let's just critically evaluate that for a second. Think about the last time you tried to organize a simple group dinner.
Oh, it's always a nightmare.
Right. Just getting 6 friends to agree on a restaurant involves a mild level of negotiation, some friction, and usually a complaint or two.
At least one complaint.
So when you put 100 strangers together, like a Muslim entrepreneur, a Marxist PhD, and an 80-year-old rural farmer, human nature just defaults to tribalism and chaos.
He does.
So how does the text claim they prevent this? Do they just have an incredibly strict police force and a massive list of administrative rules?
Well, that is the crucial pivot in the essay. The text claims they achieve this absolute harmony with zero administrative commands.
Wait, really? Zero?
Zero. There are no compulsory measures, no managers dictating schedules, and no punitive laws keeping people in line.
That's hard to believe.
Every act of creative labor is described as completely voluntary.
But practically speaking, how is that even possible? If there are no managers and no rules, who cleans the bathrooms?
Right.
Who takes out the trash? Without the threat of being fired or fined, why wouldn't half the community just sit around and let the other half do all the heavy lifting?
Well, the author's answer lies in the psychological power of the soil we discussed earlier.
Okay, the culture.
Exactly. The culture itself replaces the need for administrative rules. See, in mainstream society, labor is usually a transaction. You work to survive, so you do as little as possible to maximize your return.
Right, which requires management and coercion.
But the text argues that in the second home, the culture has fundamentally rewritten that motivation. Labor is no longer a chore. It is an expression of refined soul.
So it relies on deep internal self-policing.
Yes. The motivation shifts from external punishment to internal spiritual alignment.
So if you are a Chanyuan celestial, you simply don't desire to be lazy because your soul has been nourished by this specific culture to find joy in contributing.
Furthermore, when you redefine what constitutes a complaint or a conflict through a shared cultural lens, the friction just dissolves.
How so?
Well, If everyone fully internalizes the belief that every task is a spiritual joy, the concept of arguing over who cleans the bathroom ceases to exist.
I see.
The shared narrative is so absolute that it just overrides the individual ego.
It's an incredibly bold claim, and Xu does not shy away from the historical implications of what he says he's achieved here.
No, he actively compares the second home to past historical attempts at utopia.
He specifically calls out Robert Owen's famous New Harmony Village,
Right.
which was an ambitious utopian experiment in the United States back in the 19th century.
Yeah, and Shufin casually asserts that the second home surpasses Owen's experiment by 100-fold.
100-fold.
He refers to his community with incredibly lofty titles. He calls it the kingdom of the greatest creator, a replication of heavenly life, and literally a paradise on earth.
He also uses the phrase genuine communism, which is, that is a heavily loaded term.
Oh, absolutely.
But he goes out of his way to detach it from the political baggage of the 20th century, doesn't he?
He does. He draws a very sharp distinction there because, traditional political communism in modern history has largely relied on state power.
Right.
It relies on forced redistribution and material control to enforce equality. So the friction is essentially suppressed from the top down.
Got it.
But Xu Feng's genuine communism claims to achieve equality from the bottom up, and it's purely through voluntary cultural assimilation.
So they share everything because they actually want to, not because a state apparatus forces them to.
Exactly.
But this all hinges on this magical soil, what he calls Chanyuan culture. We need to figure out what the actual ingredients of this culture are. Because if it's the glue holding an entrepreneur and a Marxist together without them tearing each other apart, it must be highly complex.
Oh, it is a grand synthesis.
Mm.
The text details that Chanyuan culture encompasses the teachings of Christ Jesus, Buddha Shakyamuni, Celestial Laozi, and the Prophet Muhammad.
Okay, wow.
And it then blends those spiritual frameworks with philosophy, science, art, and the humanities.
Let me just stop you there, because theologically speaking, those systems contradict each other.
Very much so.
Christianity has very different views on the afterlife and divinity than Buddhism or Taoism. How do you practically synthesize them without creating massive cognitive dissonance for the residents?
Well, the text implies that Chanyuan culture extracts the underlying universal truths, like the core algorithms, if you will, of these figures,
Ah, okay.
while discarding the dogmatic tribal friction that usually separates their followers. They don't view these teachings as mutually exclusive religions competing for dominance.
Yeah.
They view them as complementary chapters of a single, unified manual for human behavior.
But Shofeng doesn't limit this manual to just human behavior on Earth, does he? This is where the essay takes a sudden, massive leap into cosmic physics.
It expands exponentially. The text claims that Chanyuan culture possesses universal cosmic values.
Cosmic values.
Yeah, it is designed to be applicable not just in their commune, but across the vast universe, from hell to heaven, from the celestial world to the Buddhist paradise.
And he introduces these highly technical, almost sci-fi sounding dimensional concepts, right?
He really does.
Like, he claims the culture applies from what he calls the XYZ world to the negative X, negative Y, negative Z world.
The XYZ world, yeah.
Yeah. And he says it provides unique explanations of things like horizontal space-time. What does he actually mean by these terms?
Well, to understand Shufeng's cosmology, we have to look at how he maps existence. In this framework, the XYZ world represents our standard three-dimensional physical reality. Length, width, depth.
Right, the stuff we interact with daily.
Exactly. The XYZ world represents the inverse. So antimatter dimensions, spiritual realms, or the afterlife.
Oh, interesting.
It's a way of mathematically categorizing the seen and the unseen universe.
And what about horizontal space-time? Because usually we think of time linearly, past, present, future.
Exactly. Linear time is like driving down a single highway. But horizontal space-time, in his philosophical framework, suggests that multiple dimensions, different lifespans, and various spiritual realms are all existing simultaneously.
Stacking alongside each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Think of linear time as a single radio station playing a song. Horizontal space-time is the entire radio dial, with every station broadcasting at the exact same moment.
Oh, wow. So synthesizing this for you listening, Chanyuan culture isn't just a set of nice moral guidelines.
No.
It claims to be the ultimate grand unified operating system for reality itself.
That's a great way to put it.
It claims to possess the code that perfectly runs the spiritual software of Jesus, Buddha, and Muhammad.
And the political software of genuine communism.
Right. And even the quantum software of parallel antimatter dimensions, all simultaneously. without the system crashing.
And because they believe this operating system perfectly aligns with the ultimate facts of the universe and the truest nature of humanity, they feel completely justified in calling it heavenly culture.
I see.
It is, in their view, the final infallible truth.
Which honestly sets up an incredibly tense dynamic with the outside world.
It really does.
Because if you truly believe you have downloaded and installed the literal operating system of the universe, and it is resulting in zero conflict among your people, how do you view the billions of people outside your gates who are still running on the old, glitchy software?
That brings us to the final and perhaps most intense section of the essay. Because they believe their system is universally flawless, they operate with absolute transparency.
Right.
Zhuofeng actually issues a direct, open challenge to the entire world.
He calls out the heavy hitters.
He does.
He specifically invites religious masters, political leaders, cultural elites, scientific experts, and philosophical giants.
The invitation is a literal gauntlet. He's saying, come and try to refute our system.
And the text boasts this level of unwavering confidence, stating that if anyone on Earth can actually overturn the logic of Chanyuan culture, that person would be like gods.
It is the ultimate flex. Bring us your best minds, and they won't be able to find a single flaw in our soil.
But this confidence leads to a very stark, rigid conclusion at the end of the essay, doesn't it?
It does. The text establishes a severe binary. It states that Chanyuan culture has the power to nourish anyone. However, it insists that only those who thoroughly understand and assimilate into Chanyuan culture can be considered true civilized people.
And if you are outside looking in, even if you are a highly educated cultural elite or a religious master,
The text is explicit. Without an understanding of Chanyuan culture, regardless of your earthly status, your education, or your wealth, you are essentially categorized as a primitive person.
I have to point out the fascinating paradox here for you listening. The journey of this text starts with radical inclusion.
Yeah, massive diversity.
The author builds this incredibly diverse system based on synthesizing the most varied beliefs imaginable: Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, science, art. But it ends with an impenetrable wall.
A very harsh line.
You are either fully assimilated into our synthesized culture, or you are a primitive barbarian. Why does a community that claims to have unlocked universal absolute harmony still need to draw such a sharp, definitive line between us and them?
Well, sociologically speaking, that sharp line is the very mechanism that protects the harmony.
How do you mean?
The second home's lack of conflict relies entirely on everyone operating on the exact same heavenly culture operating system.
Right.
The moment you validate the outside world culture as equal, you introduce competing software. You introduce doubt, alternative narratives, and individual ego.
You essentially let toxic runoff into the pristine garden.
Exactly. Labeling the outside world as primitive is a necessary defense mechanism.
Yeah.
It reinforces the internal cohesion of the group.
It reminds the residents why they must never revert to the behaviors of the outside world.
Right. The utopian harmony requires the existence of a flawed dystopia to contrast itself against.
This is exactly why unpacking these texts is so valuable. Even if you, listening right now, have absolutely zero intention of moving to a commune or studying horizontal space-time, this essay is a masterclass in the mechanics of group behavior.
It really is.
It shows us how deeply a shared, unified narrative, whether that's the culture in your corporate office, the unwritten rules of your family dynamic, or the grand philosophy of a utopian second home, can radically reshape human actions.
Yeah.
When an entire group agrees to operate on the exact same cultural software, they really redefine what is possible.
It proves that human friction isn't always inevitable if the underlying belief system is strong enough to override individual self-interest.
As we wrap up today's deep dive, I want to hand it over to you for a final thought. We've covered the sociological claims, the grand religious synthesis, the cosmic physics. What is the lingering question you have after analyzing Zhuofeng's blueprint?
You know, I keep coming back to a tiny demographic detail mentioned early in the text. The community includes 5- and 6-year-old children who are currently living in this absolute conflict-free harmony.
Ah, the kids growing up in the perfect garden.
Yes, because historically, the people who build intentional utopias are adults.
Right.
They're people who lived in the mainstream world, they experienced its deep flaws and friction, and they made a conscious, difficult choice to leave it all behind and adopt a radical new system.
Their harmony is fueled by the memory of the disease they escaped.
Exactly. But what happens to a supposedly perfect utopian culture when that first generation passes the torch?
Oh, wow.
What happens when the second home is inherited by a second generation? A generation of children who never made a conscious choice to join, but simply woke up in utopia.
That is the ultimate stress test for any engineered society.
If you never experienced the toxic soil of the outside world, do you eventually forget why the walls of the garden were built in the first place?
That's a great point.
Can a culture perfectly designed to cure the world's problems survive when its citizens have never actually felt the pain of those problems? Or does the simple human urge for autonomy slowly generate an entirely new, unpredictable kind of friction?
If the cogs don't know they're part of a machine, do they eventually try to turn themselves back into messy human beings?
Exactly.
It's a brilliant question. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of utopia. Until next time, keep questioning the soil you're planted in.